Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Couric, and this is Yahoo News Live. In maybe the shortest breakup in TV history, just 6 days, the Republican frontrunner Donald Trump returned to Fox News this week after both sides claimed they would never, ever, ever get back together again. The makeup session took place on the O'Reilly factor, and the question on the floor was, fair or unfair?
All right, you're on record as saying that I've been fair to you, and I believe I have. All right, now, would I be unfair to say to you, which I would if we were at a Yankee game, hey, calling Senator Rubio a clown was not presidential? Am I fair to say, is that a fair question? Now, fair interview?
Well, for whatever reason. You've always been fair to me, Bill.
Fair? Everything fair? Are we good?
You were very fair. You're always fair.
Oh, yeah. All right.
Almost.
And we're almost, I know.
Bill O'Reilly is the host of the O'Reilly Factor and author of a new book called Killing Reagan, the Violent Assault That Changed a Presidency. Hi, Bill O'Reilly. Great to see you.
Is it really, Katie? Everybody
is.
says great to see me now. When is he leaving?
Actually, I like seeing you, and it's fun for me to chat with you on the rare occasions that we're able to do that. I know that you asked Donald Trump at least 8 times by our count if he thought you were being fair to him.
Right.
And what do you make of Donald Trump's claims that the press is often unfair to him? Is that the case, or do you think he's just thin-skinned?
I think the press is unfair to him.
You do?
Oh, yeah, I absolutely do. But I think he's too hypersensitive to some of the small stuff. Look, Donald Trump is the guy right now in the presidential sweepstakes. He's the man. And a lot of the press don't like him. We all know that, because the liberal press doesn't want a guy saying, well, I got to build a fence. We're going to round up the illegal aliens and deport them. The liberal press goes wild about that. So they don't like him. So they're going to try to put him in a bad light. Now, that being said, you can't, as Donald Trump does, attack people who are criticizing your policies, because that's what we're paid to do. I'm paid to analyze his policies.
But isn't rounding up illegal immigrants and deporting them, that's fair game? That is a policy question.
And I said that to him. I said, you're not going to be able to do that. This was one of the first interviews after he announced to the presidency. I said, you're not going to be able to round up 12 million people, put them on buses, kick in their doors, and send them back to where they originated from. The courts won't let you. The courts will stop it. Okay? Now, that's legitimate. That's not unfair. But to call Trump a bigot, a racist, anti-Hispanic, that's desperately unfair. So you keep it on policy. And that's what I try to get across to Donald Trump. If it's policy, it's not unfair unless you're distorting or lying about his record. If the question is tough, you got to roll with it because you're running for president.
You say that he bristles when people call him names, but what's interesting is that he makes a practice of calling his competitors' names almost on a daily basis.
He says he's a counterpuncher. And we got into that last night. And I said to him, listen, if somebody criticizes your policies, that's not a personal attack on you. If somebody says O'Reilly's a bad broadcaster, all right, that's their opinion. And I'm not, and it's okay, you know, my ratings speak for themselves. And it's over. But if somebody says that I'm a bad human being or they lie about me as a person, then you got a legitimate point. And I don't think Donald Trump, because he's new in the public industry, delineates the two. And that's where he gets into trouble.
Let's talk about Donald Trump, the rating driver. Clearly, he's driving ratings. Do you think, Bill, that he is overcovered by the media in some ways? Because a lot of people say this incessant coverage has increased, obviously, his already established name recognition and is taking all the oxygen out of the room for other candidates. And do you think it's cynical for the media to constantly cover him? And should news organizations show more judgment, or is it just because he drives ratings higher?
Ratings certainly is an important part of television, as you know. But how do you undercover a phenomenon? That's my question. He's a phenomenon, this man. How do you undercover that? I mean, People magazine, they want to know about his tax plan. I don't think it's a matter of coverage of Trump. I think it's a matter of exploitation of the situation in general. So I cover Trump, but I also find time to cover all the others in my hour every night. I can do everything. I can walk and chew gum at the same time. I don't think I'm exploiting it, but there's no doubt
Do you
he
think
drives
other media
ratings.
outlets are?
I don't know. I don't really watch them most of all. I mean, our ratings are the highest in the business, and I got to keep them high. So I'm cognizant of ratings. And I used Trump last night for two A and B blocks, 2 blocks on him. And I did it because, number one, he was mad at us, and now he's back.
Yeah, so how did you guys all decide
I don't know. I
to
don't
get
get
along?
into any of that.
Because Fox News wrote, quote, when
Yeah.
coverage doesn't go his way, he engages in personal attacks on our anchors and hosts,
Right.
which has grown stale and tiresome. He doesn't seem to grasp that candidates telling journalists what to ask is not how the media works in this country. So that was just a week ago. How come Fox changed its
I don't know.
mind?
I don't have anything to do with
You don't
those.
talk to Roger Ailes about
I
that?
talk to him about it, and I give him my opinion if asked, all right? But I don't formulate policy. But I think what Fox said was true, that, look, if we have Charles Krauthammer on the O'Reilly factor, and Krauthammer says that Trump is an intellectual midget, say he says that, okay? That's not me saying it, and usually I will defend Trump. I've defended Trump a lot because I think that Trump is good for America because he's drawing so many people in, and they're paying attention to the debates where they wouldn't.
In fact, you know, we've heard so many theories, Bill, about why he struck a chord. We've heard that people are, and I think this is true, tired of sort of packaged, poll-driven, focus-driven candidates who are so carefully controlled and ergo controlling in some cases. They love the fact that he's authentic and unplugged. What do you think, what else accounts for his sort of outsized standing?
The one thing that has made Donald Trump the phenomenon in politics that he is that he says he will make America great again. And most Americans, and the latest polling shows this from NBC, Wall Street Journal, feel the country is going down the drain. And that we're weak, we're confused, we're being taken advantage of by Mexico, by China, all the things that Trump says. They believe it. Now, they may not like him, but their core belief is that we are not at the height of our power now.
So you think the country is pessimistic?
Many Americans want a restoration of America's rightful place in the world as a superpower and a vibrant democracy run by a free marketplace. And there's almost a civil war in the country about that. But people are angry that America's on the decline.
Do you think that Donald Trump will last all the way through and will, in fact, get the nomination?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I mean, he's a man who is very complicated. I think he does want to win because that's what he's all about. It would be hard for him to drop out. So it's hard to say. And I think he's got a shot in Iowa and New Hampshire to do very, very well.
If he doesn't get the nomination, do you think he'll run as a third-party candidate? And what role will he play in terms of being a kingmaker?
I don't think he's going to run on third party at all. And I'd be
He
stunned.
said he wouldn't pledge,
No, but he did. But then he said with a meeting with Priebus, the Republican guy, that he wasn't going to run on third party. And I'd be stunned if it would be bad for his brand. And everything is brand with Donald. What he's going to do as far as the Republican nominee is concerned, if it isn't him, remains to be seen. I would say that he would probably recede from the public eye for a little bit. I think that's what he would do. But I could be wrong on all of this. This is just speculation.
It's so unpredictable. I mean, that's sort of the fun of it, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've known Trump for I've known Trump as long as I've known you. And that's a long time. Katie was just a baby, just a child when I met her. I've known him for a long time. I like him because, as you said, he is authentic. He's not a phony. I mean, you know, he says what he thinks, unfiltered, because he's got billions. And when you get billions, you don't have to filter. And so he's entertaining, and he's energetic, and he's knowledgeable. And that's what I look for when I want to hang out with someone.
And do you think he's truly knowledgeable about public policy? I mean, obviously he's
the
knowledgeable
big picture,
about
but
some
not
things.
the minutia. All right, so I asked
And
him
how
last night.
important is that, Bill?
It depends. It's hard to say. I think Barack Obama got in a lot of trouble because he didn't understand a lot of things that make the world go. For example, last night I asked Trump about, what do you think Putin's up to in Syria? Why is he there? What's the real big picture? You don't really know. You know, and the real picture is that Putin wants Russia to replace the United States as the primary power in the Middle East. That's the big picture. That's why he's doing all of this.
And what did Donald Trump say?
Well, he focused in on the ISIS battle and the smaller picture
Granular.
rather than the big picture, because Putin is a brilliant guy. And he's just running rings around President Obama. President Obama's going like this. And Putin's 10 steps ahead of him. And would he be 10 steps ahead of Donald Trump? Possibly. Because Putin devotes his whole life to this kind of stuff.
Does that make you worried?
It does. Putin's a villain.
But does it make you
bad
worried
man.
vis-a-vis Donald Trump as a potential presidential
No, it's not about Trump.
candidate?
We need a leader in America who can stand up to Putin.
And you don't think Donald Trump can?
I don't know. But we need a Ronald Reagan now who
Well,
stood up to the Soviet Union. He stood up to them. So that's what we need now. We need somebody to say, hold it. You know, we're the United States, and you're not going to push us around, and we are getting pushed around.
You told Trump last night he needed to be kinder and more mature.
Right.
And not refer to opponents like Marco Rubio as a clown.
Right.
But just this morning, he was back on Twitter calling Marco Rubio a lightweight, lazy, and pathetic. So much for your advice to Donald Trump.
Well, it's better than a
Bill.
clown, though, isn't it?
I don't know.
He
I don't know.
upgraded his insults a little
Lazy,
bit.
pathetic, and a lightweight. I might
Right.
take a clown over those three.
No. I told Trump that, look, if he wants to be president, you know, he's got to behave in a certain way. Do we really want to have Warren Harding come back? I don't think so. Does he understand that, the gravitas that comes with the job? I don't know, but I prefer that he kept it on the issues, as I said, rather than the personal.
We're going to talk about your book, and I just have two more questions about the campaign because it's so interesting to me. And back in August, Bill, you said that Donald Trump will allow Democrats the chance to, quote, turn defeat into victory by portraying Trump and the entire Republican Party as racist brutalizers. Both Donald Trump and Ben Carson, they seem to be neck and neck, at least in some polls. And both have made headlines for comments they've made that have been interpreted as xenophobic or defamatory towards Mexican and Muslims. Do you think that their candidacies could actually damage the GOP overall?
No, because the Republican Party is largely in tune with the philosophies of both Carson and Trump. But you used an interesting word, interpreted as. All right, so Trump got in trouble because he said these rapists, remember that? These rapists coming across the border. And I told him, I said, listen, what you were trying to say is that many or most of the women who are coming into the United States illegally are sexually abused by the coyotes who bring them across. That's true. But you didn't articulate it that way.
He didn't say rape victims, though. He said rapists.
Right. But he was talking about the coyotes, the people smugglers, not the regular Mexican people. But he didn't articulate it that way. That was a verbal mistake.
Do you think you're giving him a little bit of a pass on that?
Because he took that analysis from a recent report that said just that. So I know what he said. He just didn't say it in a way that was clear. Carson is basically saying, listen, I'm not going to support a Muslim for president because I don't believe Islam and the tenets thereof coincide with Judeo-Christian tradition on which this country was founded. It's a legitimate political point of view.
Didn't he say a Muslim couldn't run for president? Or
he said he wouldn't support him. All right? And so both of those things, I told both men, Trump and Carson, if you're going to talk about an ethnic group or a religious group, you got to be very precise.
The final question on this campaign is that, well, actually, I've got a few later on, but Mitt Romney told me when he decided not to run this go-round that the biggest mistake he made in 2012 was not courting Hispanic voters. And I'm just curious, you know, they made up about 10% of the electorate back then. The number is growing. Many people say any candidate really needs the Hispanic vote. Is that going to be damaging to the Republican candidate?
Depends who the candidate is. They have to persuade.
Right. So do you see that as an issue?
It depends who the candidate is.
If it's
the
Donald
Republican
Trump
candidate,
or Ben Carson or someone like
depends,
that.
Look, if it's Trump, if it's Carson, if it's any of the others, they have to persuade Hispanic Americans that they're looking out for them.
Is that going to be hard to do you think
it'll
given
be
some of the
harder.
comments that Donald Trump has made?
It'll be harder, but I think it can be done. You look, Hispanic Americans aren't any different than white Americans. They all want to do well by their families, all decent, law-abiding, right? Do well by their families, have an equal shot in the marketplace, right? They love their country. I taught them when I was a high school teacher in Miami, all right? There's no difference between Hispanic Americans, black Americans, and white Americans. They're all the same. They're motivated by being treated fairly, doing the best they can in the workplace, and helping their families. The Republican candidate has to say, look, I'm going to help you do that. And if he or she does, they'll get some Hispanic votes.
Let's talk about your book, Killing Reagan. It's about our 40th president, Ronald Reagan, whose shadow still looms large over the Republican Party. In fact, in the second GOP debate, as I'm sure you noticed at the Reagan Library, his name was invoked a total of 45 times.
45?
We did a little mashup. Let's take a look.
I think I actually flew on this plane with Ronald Reagan.
He loved Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan knew how to go big and go bold.
Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, our plan is based on the Ronald Reagan tax cuts.
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan did?
Just like President Reagan.
Think if Reagan had said that during the Cold War.
Which of the candidates do you think is most Reagan-esque, having written this book?
I don't root for any. I don't endorse any. I don't do any of that. So I'm not going to say
I'm
that.
not asking you to endorse. I'm saying who seems most like Ronald Reagan?
I don't see any politician in the country today like Ronald Reagan. I think Ronald Reagan was a unique individual, all right, who was way more complicated than people think he was. And that's why I wrote the book, to show all the sides of Ronald Reagan, not just the mythology, all right? And I don't see any politician that had the background that he had or the obsession with communism that he had.
And what did you learn about him that was surprising? I mean, unlike other subjects you've turned your crosshairs on, Jesus, Patton, Lincoln, Kennedy, 4 books, very successful franchise now, killing those people. Reagan's presidency is much more recent, and many of us of a certain age know a lot about him already.
Yeah, you lived through it.
So
you know a lot about him, but you don't know of him.
What did you learn? Did anything change your opinion of him?
Oh, yeah. Now I know what he was, him as a human being after researching this book. He was a flawed man like we all are. He was a sinner like we all are. But the overriding characteristic that Ronald Reagan had was courage. He was a courageous man. And that has not been emphasized in his legacy.
Really? You don't think so?
Ideology has been emphasized in Reagan's legacy, but not courage. And we open the book with a story about him, the communists in Hollywood. He was an actor at the time. And the communists were trying to take over the studios, and they were on strike. And Reagan had a film, and the communists were throwing bricks at the actors who were crossing the picket lines and all of that. All the actors were either snuck in through a drainage pipe to the studios or on the floor of the bus. Reagan wouldn't go on the floor. He stood up straight, all right? And the bricks were whizzing by him, and he says, I'm not going on any floor. And all throughout the book, particularly after he was shot and almost killed, he showed an enormous amount of personal courage.
At
and
the
that has
same
not
time,
been emphasized.
I know you wrote about this, Bill, and you said it describes what you say was a major change in President Reagan after the assassination attempt by John Hinckley in 1981. You wrote, President Reagan had, quote, delegated much power to Nancy. Occasionally, he avoids the Oval Office altogether, spending hours during the day watching television reruns in the upstairs residence. Even more troubling, it is no longer given that the president will take the time to read important policy papers. One of his aides, in fact, suggested at one point he was unfit for office. I think reading that, many Americans will find that very troubling.
And it's true. That came from a report by a man named James Cannon, who was assigned by all the Reagan White House advisors to do an investigation on Ronald Reagan and whether he was capable of running the country. This didn't come from me. This is his report. And they had to decide, Baker and all of the others, whether Ronald Reagan could carry out the duties.
And did it change? Did he become more engaged?
This is stunning. And I don't want to give away too much because I want people to read the book. But there was a meeting in the Oval Office, and Reagan came down with all his advisors around him, and they quizzed him. And if he had failed the quiz, they were going to have Bush the elder, vice president, come in and maybe remove him. But Reagan rose up, dominated the meeting, and they were all so happy because he had, as they said, not me, he had his good days and his bad days. And I want to point out one more thing about this book. There are no anonymous sources in this book. Everything that happens in this book is documented with at least 2 sources named in it. So this isn't any innuendo, any gossip. This is eyewitness accounts on the record.
You've gotten some harsh criticism for the book. The headline in the National Review was "Killing the Reagan Legacy." USA Today called it a misfire, although it's #1 on their bestseller list as of this morning. Michael Reagan, the president's son, wrote, quote, "Killing Reagan is certainly not a hatchet job." No pun intended. But the fact remains, it would have been a better book if O'Reilly or his co-author had contacted me regarding the events of that terrible day and the effect it had on the family. I'm curious, why didn't you reach out to Michael Reagan?
Because he wasn't there. He wasn't there.
Well, he was there for the aftermath, right?
Why? He wasn't there. Everything we have is there. We investigated this book on who was there. I don't want secondary sources. This is all primary stuff. This book makes Ronald Reagan, if you read the book, look so good. It's amazing because he was so brave and came back from something that would have wiped out 90% of people gone through it. Can you imagine being so close to death at age 70 and a bullet in your system, and then 2 weeks later you're a vibrant guy again? And what he went through, he had his good days and his bad days. On his bad days, he was watching soap operas. On his good days, he was destroying communism.
What did you find out about the effects of Alzheimer's on the president? Because, of course, that's been a big controversy in the waning days of his presidency.
Well, we quote from the Mayo Clinic exams of Ronald Reagan. That's all I can tell you, Katie, is that it's not me doing this. I'm not a doctor. But we got the Mayo Clinic records of his physicals, and it's in the book. And he was predisposed, because of his mom, to have Alzheimer's. And it wasn't there while he was in office, but very quickly after he left, he got into big trouble. And I think Nancy Reagan, who knew him better than anyone else on earth, guarded him so closely in the White House. Do you realize that nobody could see Ronald Reagan unless Nancy signed off on it? Nobody. She had to sign off on it. She knew that her husband had been grievously wounded, and she was protecting him every step of the way, which I think is heroic myself, all right? So there was a lot here that people don't know about.
Well, it's a fascinating book, and before we go, I'm going to throw out a few names and get you to do a word association game with me. All right, ready? Ben Carson.
Like him, honest, really wants to help people.
Good president?
I don't know if he has the experience. I just don't know whether he has. You know, we put Barack Obama in office with not a lot of experience, and the president ran into big trouble. I think everybody has to keep that in mind. But as a soul, as a man, I don't think they come finer than Ben Carson.
Joe Biden.
I don't know the vice president. Every time we see him, he makes fun of me.
He does?
Yeah, he's got a great sense of humor. But he has lockstepped with Barack Obama. So if you're going to support Joe Biden, that means you are okay with the way the White House has been run for the past 7 years. I think that's going to be problematic. I do believe he will run.
You do?
Yes.
Carly Fiorina.
I don't know her well, but she's been on the Factor a few times. The last time she was really good, and I hit her with some haymakers. I really did. I gave her my best shots, and she fielded them, and I was very impressed with her. But as a person, I don't really know her.
She's very well versed on the issues, but she's gotten a lot of heat for describing those Planned Parenthood videos in a way that just...
And she did exactly what Trump did on the Mexican thing and what Carson did on the Muslim thing. Her wording wasn't precise enough. What she saw was not part of the sting operation. It was a separate video that the pro-life organization put into the sting. But she didn't delineate that, and that's where she got into trouble.
Bernie Sanders.
Love Bernie. Love him. I wouldn't vote for him. I like to keep my house. Bernie's a socialist. Okay? We know how that's worked out in Cuba. Oh, man. But Bernie is a guy, whip smart. And he won't come on my show anymore. He used to have him on all the time. But now, you know, he doesn't want to get it as far left kooks angry at him, so he doesn't come on. But Bernie is as entertaining a politician as you can find.
Pope Francis.
Love him. I just think he's such a kind man. And I know what he's doing. The Catholic Church is taking huge hits. And he's trying to get people back, you know, and he's a believer in what he believes. And you may not agree with him on global warming or the capitalistic system, but he really believes it. And that's fine with me. And if you're sincere and you're looking out, trying to do good for people, I don't really care what your beliefs are. But I think Pope Francis is doing exactly what Jesus would do. He's kind. He wants people to have good lives, and he's working in that direction.
Please don't write your next book, Killing Pope Francis, okay?
I hope Pope Francis reigns for a long, long time.
Hillary Clinton.
You know, I know her a little bit, and I think that I feel bad for her. I feel sorry for Hillary Clinton. I think she's had a tough time of it in her adulthood.
Do you think she's going to be the nominee?
If Biden gets in, I think Biden will defeat her. Because I think there are stuff that she did with this email, and the press hasn't turned against Hillary Clinton per se, but they don't like her, generally speaking. The American press, which is very unusual for a liberal woman, they don't like her. And I don't know if that's fair to Hillary Clinton. I really don't. The times that I've spoken to her, and I've spoken to her off the record on the telephone, she's very smart, very nice, but I think it's going to be very hard for her to win the presidency with all of the stuff that she's got following her around.
Jeb Bush.
I have an interview with Bush tomorrow. I think he's got to change his style if he wants to be president. I mean, he's smart. He did a nice job in Florida as governor for 8 years. Did a good job there. But this is a crazy age we're living in. You got to show some passion out there because Americans are looking for a real strong leader. So I think Bush should read Killing Reagan and try to adopt some Reaganisms and be strong and say, listen, this is what I'm going to do to make your life better, rather than be the wonk that we've seen.
Kim Davis.
The lady in Kentucky?
Yes. Well, apparently, I read she met with Pope Francis.
Yeah, I think that's what her lawyer says. Conscientious objector, that's what she is. And that's how the story should have been played. In her conscience, she doesn't want to write a gay marriage sheet. Okay, don't write it. But don't stop anybody else from writing it. You can't have anarchy in this country. So she should have said, look, just like in Vietnam, you know, I'm a conscientious objector. I don't want to go over and do this. So I'm willing to take the punishment that comes. That's my conscience. That's what it should have been.
Should she be hailed as a hero, as she has been by some?
Well, if people believe the way she believes and see that she's following her conscience, sure. But if people don't believe the way she believes, then she becomes an anarchist. All right? I'm glad they worked that out. You know, when the law is passed, even if you disagree with the law, you have to obey the law. Well, we don't have a country anymore.
And finally, John Boehner.
Boehner. You know what Dennis Miller calls him?
No.
Tammy Faye Boehner. Because he's always crying.
I know. He's
It's
an
a good
emotional
one.
guy.
He's an emotional guy. I don't know him very well. Never came
Do you
on.
think he should have hung in there, or do you think it was the right
I'm
thing
glad
to
he's
do?
out. I'm glad he's out of there. He never came on my program. All right, and I love.
Okay,
this.
so
You're
keep
such
that.
You're such a no. I'm saying that not for that reason. You're such a Republican, O'Reilly. A lot of these Republicans won't come near me. All right, I mean, won't come near me. But it's not Boehner's time now. See, you have to. He's an old-time pal. He's LBJ, behind-the-scene deal-making.
But don't you have to have some deal-making bill to get
Yeah,
things
but the
done?
folks don't want that anymore. You have to have some. But they want to lead. They want leadership that's going to say, this is what I stand for. This is why I'm doing
But
what
where
I'm
does
doing.
that meet compromise, which results in things actually getting done? Because if everybody just digs in their heels and say, this is what I believe, and there's absolutely no room for compromise,
No, there's
things
room.
often don't get done.
No, I disagree with you. There's room, but you have to state your case. State your case. And then you say, we're going to try to get this done, but if we can't get 100% of it done,
We're going to shut down the government?
no, we'll get 70% of it done.
And what about the government shutdown and what's
That's
been
a
going
bunch
on?
of garbage. I don't even cover it. It's just a
Really?
bunch of posturing. I don't even bother with it. I'm not involved with that. I want leadership. Whoever is the next president has to lead, not be a deal maker, not be crying, not be calling people names. We don't need that here. All right? We need a leader. And I hope we get one.
What is your next book going to be?
I
Do
can't
know?
tell you because
Oh, come on.
No, because
You've not
every
killed
time
a
I
woman
do
yet.
that, you know, I mentioned we were going to do Jesus and the Killing Jesus, and somebody else put out a book called Killing Jesus.
Oh.
3 weeks before Killing Jesus came out, the real Killing Jesus. But I'll tell you what, it's a war book. The next book is a war book, like
Killing.
Patton. But nobody will ever guess. But it's unbelievably gruesome and bloody. It's been, again, stories people don't know. I write books for people who care about their country. and want to really know what happened.
Bill O'Reilly, thanks for coming by.
Thanks
Good
for
to
having
see
me in
you.
here.
Fun talking to you as always.
That was a good interview. I enjoyed it.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We also always look forward to hearing what you have to say, so you can use the hashtag Yahoo Live and let us know what you think about Bill and his new book, Killing Reagan, or anything else that's on your mind. For now, I'm Katie Couric. Thanks for watching.